Good evening and a warm welcome to Rushcliffe Borough Council's Planning Committee meeting. I'd like to remind everyone that the meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the Council's YouTube channel. A recording of the meeting will be available afterwards on the Council's YouTube channel. In addition, other people may film, record, post on social media or blog from this meeting. The use of any such images or sound recordings is not under the Council's control. May I remind councillors to please switch off your microphones when you are not speaking. Thank you. And by way of introductions to some of the officers supporting us this evening, we have Shazza Brannan, Head of Planning, Andrew Cullen, Planning Manager, Michelle Dunn, Team Manager for Planning, Gareth Elliott, Senior Planning Officer, Mandy Dayson-Smith, Area Planning Officer, Tom Pettit, Landscape Officer, and Rachel Clack, the Borough Solicitor. Just before we move on to the agenda, just want to confirm that we've received and had the opportunity to see the late representations that were submitted. And moving on then to item 1, apologies for absence.
Yes, thank you, Chair. We've received apologies from Councillor Brown, and Councillor Butler is here as a substitute. Thank you.
Are there any declarations of interest? Councillor Mason?
Not actually a declaration of interest. It says ward member. I shall not be taking part in the debate or have a vote. Okay. Is that right?
Just to clarify, Councillor Mason, I understand that is on the tree preservation order for 147 C Toller.
Sorry. Yes.
In Tollerton. Is that correct?
Yes.
So, as you are the ward member, you will be standing down from the debate and vote on that item only.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So we move on to the minutes of the last meeting. Are we content that they're an accurate record of that meeting? Very good. Do that. Formalities before I forget.
Sorry, apologies, Chair. I think I just I misspoke. I think Councillor Mason is standing down from this next item, which is the tree preservation order for Tollerton Lane. Thank you.
Well, we move on then to the main business of the evening. The first item being a tree preservation order with respect to 147 Tollerton Lane, and I'll hand over now to Mr. Pettit, please, for the presentation. Okay, so we move on now to the next application, which relates to land at Main Street, Flintham, and Mr. Elliott is going to take us through this one. Please, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, just to mention that there's been 2 late representations, and these have been summarised and sent over to members in the usual manner, and the full comments are available to view on the website. So this application is a hybrid application. It seeks full plan permission for 14 affordable units and outline permission for 3 self-builds. This is the application site located in open countryside to the east of Flintham. This next slide is an aerial view which shows the status of the site. Members will notice that it's an existing orchard area with a pasture area in this area here. And just some photos now, just to take you through the context of the wider site. These photos are taken on Main Street. The top left-hand side photo is on Main Street looking in easterly direction. And then in the bottom right-hand side is photo in the same position, but looking the other direction. And you can just see the Boot and Shoe public house in the middle there. Still on Main Street, moving closer towards the application site. Members will note that the character of the street scene has moved from one that's sort of urban area to much more rural character, and the roads are narrow with no footpaths on either side and the high hedgerows on either side. Some shots now closer to the application site on Main Street. The top left hand photo here with the boundary is the hedgerow is the back frontage of the site. And then just off the left, you can see Orchard Cottage and Stone Cottage, as well as the Mowbray, which is the Grade 2 listed building. And then the top right-hand photo, just to mention there, that's the stile. That's the entrance to the footpath that runs through the middle of the site. Top bottom left photo is to the east of the application site, looking towards it, with the boundary hedge just there showing the frontage of the site. And in the bottom right, again on Main Street, Orchard Cottage, Stone Cottage, and the Mowbray on the left-hand side, with the hedge on the frontage, showing the frontage of the site. We're now inside the site itself. Top left-hand side, we're on the existing footpath, looking through the orchard area. Another shot of the orchard area where we can see Orchard Cottage, Stone Cottage on that side. Now this is the existing entrance into the site, and it's also worth pointing out that at this point this is an important view through the site that's been identified within the conservation area appraisal, and the bottom right hand side just another shot showing the orchard area. This is the general layout. Members will note single vehicular entrance, then forks off to the right, which is where the 13 affordable units would be, and then the gatehouse single dwelling there, also an affordable unit, and then the 3 larger units at the top, that will be the outline permission sought for the 3 self-builds. This slide here is taken from the County Council Highway Authority consultation response. The application site is shown in purple, and then the red, blue and green lines shown on the site are indicating the continuous footpath. Members will note that there's no continuous footpath in this area, and a broken footpath in this area as well. This is a mock-up of the proposed development, an aerial view where you can see the 13 terrace dwellings in this area, the gatehouse dwelling along close to the frontage, and then just grayed out the self-built plots over here. Another mock-up, at this time centrally positioned within the site, looking towards the terrace dwellings, and you can see the proposed parking layout that will be associated with the development. These are the elevation plans. You can see that they are of a traditional Muse type terrace design. Again, the elevations and floor plans associated with the terrace dwellings. And then this next slide, we can see the elevations of the single gatehouse dwelling. This slide here is the information on the TPO that covers the site. T1, T2, T3 and T4 are the individual protected trees, and then you've got G1, which is the group of fruit trees with the area of that group of trees indicated by the hatched area there. And this slide shows the full extent of the conservation area. The red circle here is the approximate position of the application site. So just to give you some context and show you where the site is in context with the rest of the conservation area. This slide here shows the application site in contrast to where the amenities of the settlement are. The green circle there is the primary school, and the blue is the museum and where the community shop is located. Orange is the village hall, and that burgundy colour is the Boot and Shoe public house. I'll leave it on there for the moment, just take you through some of the consultation responses that we've received at Key. From the strategic housing officer has raised a concern and raised an objection. This is based on the housing needs survey, which is considered to be neither robust nor up to date, and the applicant has not demonstrated a local need existed to justify a rural exception site in Flintham. Conservation officer has also objected, and I just wanted to point out some comments from the officer in that respect. They stated the site is an identified positive open space. A development on this site would have a significant negative impact on the special interest of the conservation area, including uncharacteristic protrusion of development into a large area of uninterrupted open countryside, and negative impact on the appearance and character of the village in the area of Main Street, Town End Lane. The layout of the proposed development is also considered to not be in keeping with the pattern of development in the village, which consists of dwellings lining streets quite often tightly. And the overall conclusion, which is important, the officer states, it's considered that the harm is towards the middle of the less than substantial scale. As a result, the proposal would fail to achieve the objective described as desirable within section 72 of the Planning and Listed Building Conservation Act 1990 of preserving or enhancing the character or appearance of that area, and would thus engage a strong statutory presumption against granting plan permission. In terms of trees and landscaping, the landscape officer has identified that almost all the trees on the site are protected by a tree preservation order made in 2010, which protects 4 individual trees and a group of 118 fruit trees. The proposed access, gatehouse dwelling and parking spaces for the existing proposed development would result in the loss of those trees, and it's that loss that generates the impact on public community. There's also a concern from ecology. A bat activity survey has been recommended by the consultant ecologist, and that's required to be prior to termination. That survey has not been forthcoming, and as such, the full impact on protected species cannot be assessed. The Hire Authority, whilst not objecting, pointed out that there are no footways on the application site of Main Street, and as such, the future occupiers of the proposed development would be heavily reliant on private vehicles to get from the site to the amenities within the settlement. Therefore, overall, whilst officers are very mindful that the provision of affordable housing is a positive and weighs in favour of the application, in terms of the principle, officers remain very concerned. Flintham is not a settlement identified for growth within the local plan, and the Borough Council has a housing supply in excess of 5 years. As such, the residential development should be limited to small-scale infill development within the settlement. The proposed development would not constitute a small-scale infill development, and as such, the principle of development would conflict with local policy guidance. Officers are also in agreement with the concerns raised by technical consultees. This application has not included any changes to the previous scheme, which was refused on 8 grounds and upheld at a recent appeal in March last year. There are also additional concerns raised in relation to the conflict with the Design Code SPD and an incomplete assessment on the impact on bat population. Accordingly, the application comes before members with an officer recommendation for refusal, with the precise wording of the 8 recommended refusal reasons on pages 52 to 54 of the agenda pack. Chair.
Thank you. And we have speakers registered for this item. First, I invite Mr. Whitehouse, please. So when you're ready and settled, you just think you saw earlier button on the right hand side, and when you start going, we'll set the timer.
Good evening, members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I represent Mr. Dawson and his family. They are not developers, they are landowners within the village and a family with a long-standing and generational interest in it. Over a period in excess of 15 years, they've sought to bring affordable housing to Flintham, recognising that generations within the village have been unable to get on the housing ladder to live where they grew up, and that tenants of housing have suffered high rents and varied quality of accommodation due to a lack of genuine choice. They seek to help address this issue by providing a range of affordable housing types, both to purchase and to rent, specifically for the need of families and residents of the village itself. The government has made clear what the priorities currently are. They are for the delivery of housing, and in particular the delivery of genuinely affordable homes, to address years of undersupply for communities such as this one. National policy has been updated to address this, and recent decision making within the appeal system clearly underpins this clear direction of travel. And I'll just refer to what the officer said earlier on in terms of the previous appeal decision. That direction of travel has changed in the intervening period between the last appeal and this appeal. You'll be aware of the update to the NPPF in the meantime. The applicant seeks planning consent for a rural exception scheme. It's defined in the NPPF as a delivery of affordable housing in perpetuity where sites would not normally be used for housing, to address the needs of the local community. Mr. Dawson has instructed an expert witness who specifically assesses local need to inform rural housing proposals or rural exception proposals. The detailed submission has clearly identified that there is a need for genuinely affordable homes for sale and for rent to be delivered annually in the village in order to underpin need. But this expert evidence does not need to be relied upon on its own in order to draw these conclusions. 5 separate housing needs surveys have been undertaken in this village across the previous 15-year period by affordable housing operators, some in conjunction with the council. The identified need has been remarkably consistent across this period of time, and there has been no development to satisfy the identified need. Your officer's position on this matter is essentially limited to, whilst we recognise the expert data and the historic surveys, we disagree with the conclusions. The council have had the opportunity to seek independent expert advice to challenge the information presented by the applicant's experts, or to substantiate their position by specifically responding to the points raised, to challenge them if necessary, and they've refused to do this. It is clear from the only evidence that has been prepared that there is a long-standing need within this village that needs to be satisfied. Your officers conclude that the site is too big to be a rural exception scheme, but this is an unreasoned position. A rural exception scheme is ultimately dictated by demand. There is no other guidance available to determine size, none. The scheme is on a site immediately adjacent to the village itself and seeks to implement both the bus stop and a new footpath, in conjunction with the support of comments raised by the County Council, to improve the quality of accessibility both to occupants of the site and to existing residents surrounding it. The notion presented by your officers that the site is in an unsustainable location is frankly unreasonable, because exception housing is meant to be delivered on sites that would not normally be used for housing. There is an identified need for housing within this village, and it is irrelevant that members may need to make greater use of public services to access wider facilities than elsewhere. That is the nature of a rural village. The council's continued lack of support for this scheme, a rural exception in general, is at odds with the evidence and what the government is telling them to do. There has only been one rural exception scheme approved since 2017 by this local planning authority, and none since 2020. Recently, your officers recommended refusal of an affordable housing scheme, not a rural exception scheme, in Sutton-cum-Granby, when clearly the proposal was reasonable, measured, and responded to a local need. Thankfully, members disagreed with officers then and unanimously approved it anyway. It is inevitable that development of affordable housing to support this village will impact on a parcel of green land and will impact on the conservation area. The village is enveloped by both. It will deliver built development where development wasn't there before, and as such, we agree that it will have a less than substantial impact upon the conservation area. But the proposal has been designed to appropriately respond to the characteristics of the site. A detailed landscaping scheme proposed by the retention of a strong hedgerow, the improvements of the existing orchard, not a loss of all the trees, which is a point that was raised earlier, and the creation of public open space on a site that currently provides only a private right of way. I reassure members that you are able again to disagree with your officers here. The scheme is clearly appropriate and responsive to the needs of the village, and some of the reasons for refusal, such as those associated with ecology, are inconsistent with the council's stance during the previous appeal and the position taken by the inspector. Mr. Dawson and his family respectfully request your support in order to avoid a further unnecessary and inevitable appeal. In the meantime, I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Whitehouse. And next, Mr. Faulkner, please. So again, just for consistency, I'll repeat what I said before as getting yourself settled down there. When you're ready, the right-hand button there will things will go red, and once you start speaking, we'll get the timer going.
Good evening all, and thank you, Mr. Chair. I represent my own views, as well as those of the 31 objections from the 37 public comments in objecting to this application. Much heat and emotion has been created by the latest iteration of this application, generated by broad, unsubstantiated notions of foul play, assertions of unevidenced need, and a detailed focus by the planning consultant on the minutiae within the numerous objections. I understand this heat may explain why this matter has been permitted to proceed and be referred to this committee. However, the fact is that these assertions fail utterly to overcome the central point that nothing at all within this application, either in substance or in detail, has changed in any meaningful way to justify any change to the decisions taken in relation to the original application in 2022 or the subsequent appeal. Stripped of the heat and noise, the fundamentals remain. They have been reiterated by the Council consistently on other occasions, as they should be again, in accordance with those decisions. That this is a historic orchard outside the built-up part of the village, within and intrinsic to the conservation area, and offering notable rural views to open countryside beyond. Even if the applicant could show real need which cannot be met from allocated sites, which it has failed to do, then it should not be permitted. The blatantly urbanizing effect of the proposals would erode, indeed destroy, the rural character of the site and its appearance and character, and impact materially and adversely on the conservation area, contrary to policy. Neither the updated National Planning Policy Framework adopted on the 12th of December 24, nor the proposed changes to or in the Greater Nottingham Strategic Plan affect the test to determine whether a site which is not allocated in the local plan can be treated as a rural exception. That test is whether there is a robust demonstration of local needs sufficient to justify the development of the site as a rural exception. In this case, as in the previous application, there has been no such demonstration. The updated report provided is not a housing needs survey. The only such survey was undertaken in early 22, when only 27 of 255 questionnaires were returned. The lack of response indicates the lack of any real support, and the fact that the applicant has not undertaken any further survey implies that he did not want to risk another poor response. The updated report provides only a rudimentary and flawed statistical approach and is far from robust evidence. Again, nothing has changed since previous rulings. Better sites, such as the former officers' mess, exist within the village, which are included in the plan. The proposed site is not a small site, nor is it in a suitable location. As the inspector confirmed expressly on the appeal of the previous application, the site is neither within nor adjacent to the village, has a strongly rural and out of settlement character, and makes a strong positive contribution to the conservation area as a heritage asset. The proposed development would, as the inspector also found, cause to be lost the long rural views available from and across the site, which reinforce its rural and open character. It would cause a harmful urbanizing effect, as discussed, which would not be confined to the location of the dwellings. It would neither preserve nor enhance the character or appearance of the conservation area. It would fundamentally reduce the positive contribution the site makes to the significance of the conservation area as a heritage asset, and cause substantial conflict with the development plan. It is not a small site. The proposed layout and design of the proposed dwellings and the spaces around them is atypical of the area, to the point of being, in the words of the inspector, so markedly different as to be harmful to its established character. The inspector described the design with its central courtyard, parking and turning areas, and inward faceted terraces as giving the proposal an urban character, atypical of the rest of the village.
30 seconds.
Apart from the multitude of objections from residents whose views I seek to represent, it is material that the statutory consultees have unanimously objected to the development. I would also like to highlight the Flintham Parish Council's strong objection, amongst others, in relation to the unsafe and dangerous access that would necessarily connect the site with the rest of the village, encompassing 2 blind bends with no space for a pedestrian path. The suggestion in next phase's letter of the 4th of April 25 that the proposal clearly enhances the existing orchard by comparison to its current situation is an assertion of the supremacy of bricks and tarmac
Going to
and
ask you
urban
to
planting.
wrap up now, Mr. Faulkner. We're at the time, and
Fine.
we're over the time.
Thank you. May I end where I began, which is that nothing has materially changed. Thank you.
Mr. Elliott, do you have any points of clarification arising from anything that was said there? Okay, thank you. So then, it falls to us to debate and decide. And where shall we start? Councillor Eddie, please.
I've always been a big supporter and want to see rural development sites come forward, but they have to be supported by the community. And I think the thing that strikes me about this is that the parish council aren't supporting it and many residents aren't supporting it. And that's why I have severe issues with it, and particularly given the inspector's previous rejection of it. And I think reference was made to the rural exception site in Sutton cum Granby that we approved a few months ago. And the difference with that is that we had members of their community basically coming along and telling us we were mad not to approve it, which probably changed our minds in approving it. So I certainly would find difficulty supporting this, even though I do want to see rural exception sites developed, but I don't think this meets the criteria. So that's my opening, if you like to get some debate.
So I think we're sort of starting in the area of rural exception site and potential sort of discussion about size and does it qualify. Is there Councillor Manor, who's that there? You're going to come in, who wants to come in, please?
Are we doing it like you usually do? So we'll have an opportunity to speak about other matters later, right? Okay, so from the point that's just been raised, what I'm concerned about is that whatever has been said by the applicant's representative, I'm wondering whether the officers are aware how many of these dwellings are meant to be for social rent, because a lot of evidence is around that social rent accommodation is what is severely lacking in this country, and for people that have very low incomes in rural areas, then social rent as opposed to a slight discount on the price of a house is what would be important. So I would be quite interested to know that. So I'll just leave it as that now as a question.
Yes, we'll certainly come back on all the other topics that we want to cover. Mr. Elliott, have you got the detail on the proposed mix?
I do, yeah, thank you, Chair. So we have the breakdown. It's 6 discounted market sale, 4 intermediate and 4 affordable rent.
I believe there is an actual criterion, which is social rent. Are any of them social rent? So, you know, below the average for the area.
Yeah, I don't have that information, but yeah, the information that we've got on the submitted design access is that we're broken down with 6 discounted market, 4 intermediate, 4 affordable rent.
And then the 2 self-build.
Yeah,
Yeah.
3.
3 self-build, sorry. Thank you.
There's a bit of discussion about the need or potential need for the site to be small for it to count as a rural exception site. I see the NPPF definition is of a small sites used for affordable housing. Can I just clarify that I think is the thrust of the argument here not necessarily the physical size of the site itself, but within the context of the rest of the village? Is that the basis on which assessment has been made that it's not a small site, i.e. a site of this physical size, but adjacent to a larger village could or would be, because I know we're only here to consider this one, but I just want to try and get to the bottom of how that assessment has been made.
That's correct. Yeah, we've taken the assessment of comparative to the large assessment next to it.
Nobody's indicating to come in on this, so should we move on to a different area? Councillor Butler, I think you were.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, one of the first things I wrote down when I read the report was looking at the history of the site and applications, and I wrote down what's the difference, and I am struggling to see what a significant difference is in both the decisions taken by the council and indeed inspectors. So perhaps just a little bit of clarification on that might be helpful. And also, just if I may just pick up on a comment I think I heard the applicant say about the needs for a rural application under rural exemption, and I agree with colleagues that the theory of rural exemption sites is good, and that's what they do need to be considered very carefully. But the crucial point is, where do they go, and are they in keeping with character of the village? And I think a comment was made that there is a need, or the applicants have identified a need in the village. But when I look at the map and the plan, I don't think that the site you would say is actually in the village as such. It is adjacent to my mind, and that does cause me a worry about this application, coupled with the fact that it's a proposal of 14 properties, which, when you look at the proposed layout or suggested layout or potential layout, looks very nice. It does, but as a development. But I feel at the moment that if it will be developed in an inappropriate location for what is directly adjacent to a very, very rural village. So just a couple of observations at this stage on that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So if we deal with what's new first, I think we'd be directed to paragraphs 11 to 19 of the report. But Mr. Elliott, whether you want to kind of just give us a further summary of that, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So there's no change to the proposed development in terms of what's being proposed. Paragraphs 10 to 19 of the report goes through the changes in terms of policies, including changes to the NPPF, the adoption of the SPD. But in terms of the actual the type of development that's been proposed, nothing.
Councillor Calvert.
Thank you, Chair. I fear I may be repeating what others have said, but I've just got 3 general points I want to make about the application. First of all, I feel it's a very ambitious looking proposal, and I could support it, but it would have to be in a completely different location. Secondly,
I feel I'm very aware that there's a lack of local support. I note that the parish council itself objects to the application. And finally, in the conclusion of the report, there's a catalogue of policy reasons to refuse, none of which I could disagree with. So that's where I stand with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Chaplin, please.
I'm ready now. Thank you. Yeah, so just going back on what's changed, as far as I can see, what's changed has been all the headlines about how this government are going to ride roughshod over local planners and build. An interpretation that I don't go along with. I've done some reading on this because obviously I would be appalled if the Labour government was saying we're going to build everywhere regardless of where it is. So although the rules have changed slightly, I can't see that anything has changed since last time. So I would agree with the officers on this one.
Okay. Councillor Mason.
Yes, I'm looking at you know, the end of underneath the recommendations and why the recommendations are there, and I cannot make any comment other than actually, yeah, I support the recommendation to refuse. So as I'm quite happy to put that recommendation forward.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wells.
Thank you, Chair. On Sunday, I went and visited this site, and it is a beautiful orchard, I must admit, but I couldn't find the footpath on the site. There is a sign on the gate saying trespassers will be prosecuted, but the problem is, for me, everybody wants social housing and housing for farm workers, but in a village, in the countryside, where are you going to put it? So it's got to be out on the boundary. So I'm in favour of this. Thank you.
Yeah, Councillor Mallender, and then come to Councillor Thomas after that.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I'm just recovering from what's just been said. I think I'm not quite sure whether the councillor meant that people don't want to live next to people who haven't got much money. But anyway, just to clarify my last statement, but I am going on to some other things. Affordable rent is 80% of private rent, which in Flintham is £973 on average per calendar month, which is not probably affordable to people who are on a low income. Social rent, which is what I asked about, is significantly below market rent, and that is, so I presume from the answer that there is no social rent housing on the site. So just that was a clarification. So my other point was to do with access. Again, if we're going to talk about the people living here, it providing accommodation for people who need it, and who are perhaps on low incomes and perhaps don't have vehicles. It is, I've just had a look on, and it takes an hour and a half to get there in the middle of the day, plus about 30 minutes walk on a 90 bus. Which runs once an hour. It doesn't run later than I thought it would, actually, to be fair. But again, that 30 minutes walk is along roads that don't have pavements and which are unsafe, and include areas which are, there's no access that's readily available. The promise to put a new bus stop
seems somewhat bizarre to me, because you can put a bus stop wherever you like, but you've got to get the bus company to run a bus to that bus stop. And I'm afraid to say that things I have seen so far that we've given permission for in this council is there seems to be very little possibility of getting bus companies to run buses anew and on new routes or continuations of routes. They have to work on how much money they can make, and if they've only got 2 or 3 people, they're not going to do that. And then the other point I'd like to make, so if we could, I don't know whether we can do the 2 things, access and habitats I was going to talk about, and then the environmental aspect of it. Oh yes, and the other point was about the access, is that I take very seriously the parish council's objection to the very dangerous entrance into the site. So this is priority habitat. It looks like proper surveys, well, clear that proper surveys haven't been done. And it's obviously there appear to be some trees on the site, but that not really any, doesn't look like there's any real recognition of significant trees or the orchard trees, which are very much under threat in this country. So I would like to second the recommendation after Councillor Mason has proposed it, please.
Okay, Councillor Thomas.
No, it's just a couple of things from me, really. I haven't seen, I get the whole rural exception thing and I get the whole affordable housing thing. I haven't seen a mechanism for actually targeting and allocating this housing to people with a need to be local. If it's not social rent, it won't go through choice-based lettings, as I understand it, and so there is no. I haven't seen what the mechanism would be to ensure that people local who wanted these houses would get them, as it were. Also, there's an application site down the road for, I think it's currently in for 115 or something houses. It's in the local plan for 90 or 95 houses, and if that site delivers, there will be affordable housing provided. You know, it hasn't. It's not. Doesn't seem to be moving at the moment, though. So I don't know if we could count that really. As far as there's one killer reason for not allowing this, in my view, and that's the sustainability. I think it's in a sustainable location, a reasonably sustainable location in terms of the village of Flintham, which has got a primary school, it's got a pub, it's got a village hall, it's got a community shop, it's got playing fields, it's got a certain amount of infrastructure, it's got bus service. But I believe one of the bus services goes past the site. Is that correct? But that's only got 2 buses early in the morning and 2 buses, you know, early evening. And it's possible to walk to buses on the A46, as I understand it. So Flintham isn't a key settlement with full range of facilities. It isn't a second tier settlement, but it's not far below some of the second tier settlements that were allocated sites in local plan part 2. And with additional houses on the other side, it will be a bigger settlement, which will bring more sustainability. The school has got places. It's a very small village school, you know, that needs people to grow the community. But the absolute killer argument as far as the sustainability of the site is concerned for me is the fact that you could not walk a child from that site to the school safely, especially if you've got another child in a buggy, a baby in a buggy. It's just not, I can't see how that could happen. It's not been demonstrated to me that there is a safe footpath. The county council are asking for £35,000 to aid pedestrian you know, access in the village, but there's no verges where they can put a footpath. There's nowhere to put a footpath. There are verges, but they don't look as though they'd provide a footpath to me. And there are parts where you couldn't put a footpath. So there's no way for those people in those affordable houses to get the children to school safely. And that for me is the killer argument. And the county council, as usual, has put in for money to do something that there is no way. We've had pavements, money for pavements in Eastleigh, where smaller and easier places to put pavements than this, and the amount of money wasn't sufficient. £35,000 is not enough to provide a safe pedestrian walking route from this site to the facilities in Flintham. So on that basis in particular, I agree with the recommendation. Yeah.
Thank you. Just one thing from me, Kate, as you mentioned earlier about the link between the rural exception site, if you like, the acquisition process, if you like, or the link to people, local people. You know, my understanding of these, of the schemes, one that I'm particularly aware of locally, that there is a cascade mechanism whereby, the owner is under an obligation to offer it to people with the qualifying connection for a certain period of time. And then if that's taken up, then great. If not, then it flows down to, and cascades out. The Councillor Ellis was indicating.
Thanks, Chair. One of the points that the objectors made was that there was a planning application in for 114 houses on the former Islamic Institute site. That hasn't really been mentioned, has it? And it seems to me if there is an application in for 114 houses, you certainly wouldn't need a small extra number of houses on the outskirts of the village.
I think we're considering this application, but no, it hasn't been mentioned by anybody. Certainly hasn't been mentioned, mentioned or.
I think that's a very material consideration. Is there an application or isn't there?
Yeah, I can provide clarification. Yes, we have an application in for 114 on that site that's currently pending consideration.
That's a decider for me, Chair. I will support Councillor Mason's motion.
Thank you, Councillor Birch.
Yeah, I've got some comments on another aspect. Are we finished with that discussion on that bit? Yeah, so I'd like to discuss the technical flaws in the application. And like Councillor Eddy, my instincts are to be pro-development and entrepreneurial, and I do think the site's attractive and it's well designed from an aesthetics point of view. I do agree with some of the previous comments as well about transport and pedestrian access, but in terms of the technical flaws, no BAT survey. That is such a basic omission as to make a bit of a mockery of this council, I think, that they wasn't included. The housing needs survey is very clearly flawed in terms of the data being unreliable and the methodology being unreliable and out of date. And there's no affordability modelling that we can rely on for some of the claims that have been made in the application. And I think it's just very surprising that it's come to committee with these flaws in it. And I think that's important, that there is essential information missing from the application before us tonight.
Mr. Elliott.
Sorry, Ash, just clarifying on the BAT survey. There is an ecology survey and there is a roost assessment supplied as part of this application. But within those surveys, a further BAT activity survey has been requested due to the type and nature of some of the trees within the site. And that hasn't come forward. Now, the advice from Natural England, who are statutory consultees on this, is that all surveys of that nature should come forward prior to determination so that the decision maker can make a full assessment on the protected. So there are some surveys, it's just the activity survey hasn't come forward.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying, but that has been explicitly requested by officers in writing and has not been done. And again, that fires off warning signs in my head. Why hasn't it been submitted? It's ridiculous.
Councillor Thomas.
Just on the bats, would it be possible to condition that the application be approved subject to a satisfactory provided bat survey?
The advice is from Natural England that those types of surveys should not be conditioned. We should be dealing with it as part of the application prior to determination.
Are there any other matters that councillors would like to raise, discuss, comment upon? Okay, very good. So we have the recommendation in the report to refuse planning permission for the reasons outlined in the report, which has been proposed by Councillor Mason and seconded by Councillor Mallender. So I'll ask you now to indicate all of those in favour. And those against? So the proposal has been carried. An application should be refused for the reasons outlined in the report. And we're going to adjourn for 5 minutes for comfort, please. Right, so we move on to note the appeals.
Thank you, Chair. So yes, just the 2 appeals from September. As ever, if you've got any queries, questions, then feel free to let me know or contact me afterwards. I would just mention on the second one, there was a costs awards refused for both the council and the appellant. So that the inspector didn't find that either side were unreasonable in that appeal. But yeah, any questions?
Right, so that concludes our business.